A new Windows 0 day from Nightmare Eclipse on Patch Tuesday, LAPD is dropping their flock contract, and new research into the privacy of top period trackers. All this and more coming up on This Week in Privacy 62, so stay tuned.
Welcome back to This Week in Privacy, our weekly series where we discuss the latest updates with what we're working on within the Privacy Guides community and this week's top stories in data privacy and cybersecurity. I am Nate, and with me this week is Jordan. How have you been, Jordan?
I've been good and been looking forward to diving into some privacy and security news this week.
Yeah. All right. Well, then let's jump right in. Let's talk about our first story, which is about Microsoft. So the headline says Microsoft 0 Day drops the same day Microsoft releases record number of patches. So for those of you who are blessed enough not to have to use Microsoft, or not to use Windows, I should say, Microsoft releases once a month. They release their patches all at once, and that includes everything. That includes, feature fixes, bug fixes, security fixes. And they call it Patch Tuesday because I believe it's the first Tuesday of every month, or maybe the second Tuesday, something like that. So this month's Patch Tuesday had, I want to say, like 500, give or take, patches, which I did not realize was a record. I swear I thought they released like 600 once upon a time, but apparently it was a record number of patches. And at the same time, let me go back a little bit and give you some context. We've covered this on this channel before. There is a security researcher who is going by the pseudonym of Nightmare Eclipse, and they claim that they have disclosed a number of vulnerabilities to Microsoft, which Microsoft has ignored. They say that they've disclosed these vulnerabilities, they've proven they work, and Microsoft either brushes them off, or I think at one point Microsoft even got them removed off GitHub, got like this person banned from GitHub. So this person is kind of, understandably so, has kind of taken it personally and been like, okay, fine, then I'll play dirty. And so instead of doing the normal responsible disclosure is what it's called, where you alert the company and then you give them about 90 days to fix it. And then you tell everybody like, hey, I found this vulnerability. Here's how it works. Now they're just going scorched earth, I guess you could say. And yeah, it's pretty wild. Like I feel like they had to have done this on purpose. Within hours of Microsoft releasing all their Patch Tuesday fixes, they released this new 0 Day, which according to this article is now sending Microsoft scrambling to fix it. So this new 0 Day is being called Hive Legacy. It's an escalation of privilege exploit that targets a vulnerability residing in the Windows user profile service. And it seems to me, as someone who is very open about not being super great with code, it seems to me like this requires a little bit of legwork. This is definitely not, I always mention that we talk about vulnerabilities sometimes that are like, oh, you have to have access to the device for 3 hours and you have to plant malware on it. And it's like, really? Like, is that really a vulnerability at that point? This one sounds like it can be done remotely, but it's a little bit more than just like point and click. So basically what you have to do, it says it allows users with limited system rights to compromise an admin user's account by modifying its class's registry hive, which is a resource that ensures the correct application opens when certain types of files are clicked in Windows Explorer. Again, some of this really goes over my head. So if it goes over your head, I apologize too. But for those of you who want the details, basically, they say the attacker can modify Windows registry associated with an admin account. The exploit requires the attacker to know another user's credentials. So that's the first step. It says that the account need not be admin. I think they're talking about the attacker's account. So basically, let's say you have a computer that has an admin account and a regular user account. If you compromise the user account and you know the admin user's credentials, that's step one. this is where I feel like it's starting to get a little bit iffy, but it says an attacker must also know the username of a third account, also with or without admin status on the machine. So at minimum, the account has to have the machine has to have 3 accounts, which I'm going to go out there and say is probably not that unusual. I know at my last job, they gave us work computers, and those were our laptops. Like, we took them around with us everywhere. We used them to clock in, clock out, Teams, all that stuff. Those really only had our accounts on them, but I'm certain that there are a lot of places where it's far more normal to rotate desks and like multiple people log in and there's multiple accounts. And I am pretty sure that when somebody logs into a machine, the account kind of stays there until you go in and manually remove it. Don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure that's how Windows works. So in theory, I could see a lot of potential organizations where that is a realistic setup, where there's multiple accounts linked to one computer. However, again, you have to know the admin user's credentials. You have to know a third user's credentials. And actually, I didn't even think about this before, but now that I think about it, oh, you know what? I take it back. Okay, I was about to say, like, if you know the admin user's credentials, doesn't that kind of get rid of it? But it says here that the account. Okay, so none of the accounts need to be admin. You just need to know three user credentials, and then you can break into the admin users. Okay. Sorry about that. I swear I read this article earlier, but we're going a little bit earlier than usual, so I haven't had as much time to process it. But yeah, so this I mean, that's really kind of all it is here. Is this researcher has disclosed this again hours after Windows dropped their updates, because they're probably trying to make a point and trying to piss off Microsoft on purpose, which is probably fair. And Microsoft said that they're aware of the vulnerability, they're investigating. They also noted their preference that reporters follow a coordinated disclosure policy, which again, this researcher is saying that Microsoft has been ignoring, which is why they're not doing coordinated disclosure. And there are some instructions here on how to like see if this affects you. But I think for the average everyday home user, this is probably not that big a deal. I guess maybe if you have like a family computer where each user has their own account, but if you just have like your own computer where it's just your user account, or like your user account, your admin account, which is one trick that I think we recommend, then that probably reduces the likelihood of this attack. So real quick before I turn it over to Jordan, some people are asking, what are we talking about? We're talking about Windows 0 Day, a vulnerability that was dropped hours after Microsoft released their Patch Tuesday. So yeah, I was kind of explaining how that works. But Jordan, did I miss anything in this story, or did anything jump out at you that you wanted to discuss?
I think the most important thing about this story, like, I think you did a great job of like explaining the attack stuff. I think, I don't really have any more to add on that, but I do think, it does highlight Microsoft's they're kind of tricky to work with, right? Like, this person submitted this patch to Microsoft before, they were ignored, and now they've decided not to do that. But it's, I think it kind of shows that Microsoft doesn't respect people that are submitting these vulnerabilities, and they're not taking them as seriously as they should. I think, obviously there's issues with not doing coordinated disclosure, because now there's possibly a bunch of people who are at risk of this, and Microsoft kind of has to scramble to find a fix. So that is a concern as well. But I also don't really blame this person, because, they probably I don't think someone would do this out of nowhere. I think they probably would have been trying to get Microsoft to fix this for a while, and they kept ignoring them. So I don't know. I just think if Microsoft embraced these people a bit better, and, instead of being kind of antagonistic towards them, instead they decided to, work with them, or, patch the things that they're submitting, I think there'd be like a much healthier dynamic there. It's just, this is like another time where we've heard Microsoft just not being good with vulnerability disclosures. I think a couple of weeks ago, like you were saying, there was this story about like Microsoft banning someone from every disclosure platform and everything, because they, submitted something that was in Microsoft's view, used for like hacking and such, or criminal activity. when, it doesn't really matter. I think you should just be fixing the vulnerability if it exists. It doesn't really matter where it's come from, or anything like that. So very disappointing stuff from Microsoft, but Microsoft is just disappointing anyway. So it's not really any different from the usual, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I actually went to go look up because I know we've covered this story in the past, and I looked up Nightmare Eclipse in Brave Search, and there's no shortage of articles. I think their last big disclosure was called Rogue Planet. So, I mean, if you guys missed that story, definitely go ahead and check that out. It's
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think I have too much to add to this one. It's pretty unfortunate. And yeah, it's really, I don't know. I mean, I want to give Microsoft some credit that in the sense that they've always had vulnerability issues. They've always had, there's always hundreds of things getting patched in these Patch Tuesdays. And, again, some of them are just regular bugs. Some of them are just feature things. They're not all security updates. It's not like there's hundreds and hundreds of security updates every time. I don't think. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, they're definitely not doing great the last couple of years, to the point where a while back they had to admit, what did they say, that like Windows is quote unquote fundamentally broken, and they promised that they're going to go ahead and try to fix it. So
yeah, I think we could endlessly rag on Microsoft, and I think maybe people would enjoy that. But I think unfortunately, in the next story, we're also going to rag on Microsoft again a little bit. But before we get to that, I did want to say that this was, something that you didn't mention this, but there was in the article, it mentions that Kevin Beaumont created a detection script. So you can check, if you check this article out, which will be in the newsletter, it will include a link to the detection script. Kevin Beaumont is like a really very well-known security person. So definitely check that out if you think you might be affected. Obviously, like Nate said, it is kind of a bit more rare because you need so many accounts, right? So just keep that in mind. But I think that was kind of interesting. I'm sure that's going to be very useful for people working in and enterprise and business areas where people do silly things. So there was a question here from Iceman Co UK. Why not people just use Linux instead then? There's still so many people using Windows despite all its flaws. I mean, not everyone really has a choice, right? It depends on the software that you use, and it depends on your situation, right? If you're working for a company, they're not going to probably like you using Linux because a bunch of stuff isn't going to work. Or, if it's a personal computer, maybe you've got programs that only work on Windows, stuff like that. We don't really, we have recommendations, and, that's up to you to follow those. And we do recommend people to use Linux, but not everyone has the ability to do that. So we just try and keep everyone up to date on what's happening, and talk about these issues. Hopefully, we bring in some Windows users onto this and they're aware of this issue, and maybe they would consider switching or something like that in the future. But that's all we can really do here.
Yeah, I just want to add to that unfortunately, a lot of privacy tools are really lagging behind when it comes to device management. So I'm pretty sure the vast majority of Windows usage is corporate usage. Not that there aren't plenty of Windows personal users as well, but I remember there was a huge jump in users when we went from Windows 10 to 11, as 10 started to get deprecated, because that's when all the corporate environments started migrating to 11, and all of a sudden you saw a huge jump in the numbers. And I guess my point is the number of corporate users is a significant number of Windows users. And because of that, that means a lot of those corporate users need to have corporate IT controls. They need to have endpoint detection systems, and they need to have the controls that block off certain websites, certain malicious domains, blah, 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 blah. And Linux is just fundamentally lacking a lot of those things. So Linux, for the most part, I think there are some distros that are starting to solve this issue, but at least up until recently, Linux hasn't really had tools that make it good for large corporate environments. And unfortunately, in large corporate environments, we simply cannot trust everyone to practice good digital hygiene, like being careful what phishing links they click and stuff like that. Otherwise, we would not be talking. I would not be publishing a data breach roundup every single week, because the vast majority of them are done via like phishing attacks and stuff like that. So it's one of those things that like corporate really needs this. Linux is not meeting that need. And I'm also thinking of like parental controls on like Graphene. I don't think Graphene has any parental controls. I'm not a parent, so I don't know. But just things like that, things that as an individual user, you're like, I don't need that. I don't care. But in a corporate environment, all of a sudden the math is completely different. And you're like, no, I absolutely need this. And Linux doesn't have that. And just to add on, like you said, like sometimes there's very specific software that like me as an audio guy, 90% of my plugins are not on Linux, which unfortunately is kind of like it's a negative feedback loop, because I'm not on Linux because my plugins don't work. Therefore, there's nobody on Linux saying, hey, make this plugin work. So therefore they don't make them Linux friendly. And I don't know how to fix that. But yeah, there's a lot of reasons people are still not using Linux. Unfortunately, there is still a gap. It's a very niche gap. I think for the average person at home who's just like surfing the web, checking their email, playing some games, like I think Linux does work. But unfortunately, for a lot of the niche stuff, there's still a huge gap there. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And I'm also looking at the website trying to see, we do recommend, operating systems. Yes, we do recommend certain Linux distros on the website. So yeah. Anyways, yeah, that's all I got.
Cool. Yeah, I guess we can dive into this this next story. Like we said, we're going to drag on Microsoft again. But yeah, this is a sort of a different thing going on. This story is from IGN. Microsoft restores player's 25-year-old account with son's baby photos after nuking it due to hacker. Microsoft has restored a player's account access to his 25-year-old account, which contained photos of his son and thousands of dollars worth of games. This isn't just any 25-year-old. This is a streamer named Joshua Kane. Basically shared that on July 16th, Xbox had reached out to him and restored access to the account, which was previously suspended after being hijacked by a hacker a few days prior, while he was extremely happy and thanked Microsoft for its help recovering his account and all the invaluable information therein. He levied some criticisms toward the brand for its initial response, claiming it had told him the suspension was irreversible at first. So yeah, this is kind of an interesting story, right? So I think it's the most important thing to note here is this person, Joshua Kane, isn't particularly famous, I would say. Obviously, he has some sort of following, like I think a couple of thousand followers on Twitter and stuff. So like not super popular, but he definitely has more clout than the average person, I would say. So, this is kind of unfortunate. If any of you have ever had this issue before, like, you've had an account compromised or something and it was used for nefarious purposes, it's really hard to get access to it again. And especially, an account like that, Microsoft account, it can contain a lot of data that can be kind of important. So it's good this guy got his account back, but it did take 3 days and, public posts on Twitter to get their attention and to get them to kind of reverse their decision. I think the most important thing about this situation is that it is not a good idea to centralize all your data into one place. And if you put everything into a singular account like this, then, if it gets hacked, then you're going to lose a ridiculous amount of data because you've stored so much in there. So I think that's like one thing we can take from this. I guess I'll throw it to you, Nate. Like, do you have any thoughts and like extra things that I didn't cover yet?
Well, the only thing I went and found his Twitch account, and apparently he's got 8.5 thousand followers. So yeah, not he's not single-handedly keeping Twitch afloat, but it looks like he's pretty consistent with his streaming, I would guess. But yeah, I mean, my thought was, well, first of all, I do appreciate this guy because I think a lot of the time we read these stories and, they're just like, oh, thank you for Microsoft for working with me to get my account back and basically sucking up. And it's really cool to see him be like, hey, I am appreciative, but also like, he said here, it's unfortunate that such a big company can bring your account back if you ask them to. The way it all went to me is a little bit shady because it's not that they can't bring your account. They won't bring back your account if you're a nobody, which is true. You shouldn't have to like shame a company and go viral and be a big name person in order to get this kind of treatment. It's really crap. And yeah, I think other than that, you really hit kind of my other big point, which is I've been sending this to friends and family, especially I mentioned my sister had her first kid recently, and kind of sending this is like, hey, where are you storing pictures of your kid? Like, what happens if that gets deleted? And I'm thinking of several years ago, we were talking about this before we started streaming. There was a guy who his toddler son started to develop a rash in his genital area. And so his doctor, I believe this was during lockdown, and I think that's why his doctor said this, but I could be remembering wrong. But his doctor basically said, like, well, keep an eye on it, see if it grows bigger. I think he even told him specifically, like, take some pictures. And if it gets worse, we'll take a look at it. And so he started taking pictures with his phone, and the pictures synced to Google Drive. Google closed his account and turned everything over to the police and said that it was CSAM, which is child sexual abuse material for those who don't know. The police investigated and cleared this guy and told Google, like, no, it's fine. Everything's above board. Like, this is a medical thing. And Google still would not reinstate his account. He actually had to get his data back from the cops. Like, the cops were basically like, that sucks. We don't know what to do. Here's what Google gave us, if that helps any. So yeah, I mean, it's really hard not to. It kind of sucks because everything is so digital now. You can either self-host, which is a huge commitment, especially if you're going to self-host everything, like all your own photos and calendar and email and everything, or you can rely on someone else. But even these encryption services, like if I'm relying on Proton Drive and Proton decides to ban me for whatever reason, what do I do? So, I mean, it's really important just to keep backups and ask yourself that question. Like, if this goes away today, what's my redundancy? What's my safety? If I think about that a lot with Signal. I've got my whole family using Signal. If end-to-end encryption gets banned and Signal pulls out of the US, which would be weird because Signal's based in the US, but you know what I mean? Like, where am I going to move my family to? If simple login goes away, where am I going to move my email aliasing to? Just at least have those plans in place, I think, is what I'm getting at. Because it's like he said, if you're not a big name, you're probably not getting your crap back. So, yeah.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, this original, like the tweets that Joshua Kane posted were getting, hundreds of boosts and likes and stuff. So I think looks like his original post was 10,000 retweets. So, and 82,000 likes. So just so we know the scale of this, it kind of blew up. So, if your post doesn't blow up on Twitter, then I kind of doubt that you'll get your account back, which sucks. I can kind of understand why it did so well though, because his original post, I don't know if we can show it on the screen. A second.
Yeah, give me a second. I can go find it here.
Microsoft deleted my account and OneDrive, and it's like all in capitals with deleted and stuff. So I can understand why, like, people saw this and were like, oh my gosh, that's like awful. Seems like it resonated with a lot of people. So yeah, it's definitely there. It is. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so it's interesting that this happened, but also kind of a special person in a very special circumstances. it is kind of funny when something starts damaging your brand, then suddenly the company is like running out to make special arrangements. So really, this should be something that's handled better by Microsoft in the future. But like Nate said, make backups. Don't store all your baby photos in OneDrive and expect it to just be there forever. Like 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1 backups, everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what is that? 10,000, almost 10,000 posts, reposts, 82,000 likes, a reach of 5.7 million, 4,700 comments. So, yeah. I mean, I don't have kids, but thousands of dollars spent on games. Yeah. Yeah, good point. So, that would be demoralizing for sure. Alrighty. Well, if that's all we have on that story, I think we'll go ahead and move on to the next one here, which is actually some good news, some rare good news, which is that the LAPD is not renewing their contract with Flock, at least for the time being. So the headline says, LAPD lets contract with surveillance giant Flock expire, citing serious concerns over civil liberties and privacy. A senior LAPD official told news outlets, first ABC7 and the Los Angeles Times, that the police department would allow its 3-year contract to expire when it ends, I believe would be this Sunday. And the department cited serious concerns around civil liberties and privacies. I don't know why I said privacies plural, civil liberties and privacy. They said particularly around privacy and the data that is being collected. The LAPD had to make a difficult decision, in this case, discontinuing Flock services until we can get those data, privacy, security, and sharing concerns ironed out through a contractual relationship. A spokesperson for the LAPD did not respond to a request for comment from TechCrunch. And I'm going to touch on this one in a second. It's unclear if Flock's cameras will continue recording in absence of an active contract. According to ABC7, the police department is seeking new language in its contract addressing privacy and data storage concerns. So LAPD is apparently the 3rd largest police department in the US. My money is going to say that the first is NYPD, New York, and I'm going to guess the first is probably going to be a federal agency like the FBI maybe, because I mean, LA and New York are the only mega cities in the US, so I don't know who would be bigger than them. But they said that several major cities have also stopped working with Flock, citing privacy worries and concerns that federal officials use cameras to track people in violation of local laws. And a Flock spokesperson said that this contract expiry caught them by surprise, quote unquote surprise, and that they were confident they could, quote, clear up the current misconceptions, unquote. Of course, they did not specify what misconceptions. So, yeah, I mean, this is pretty cool. I like the fact that they're basically saying, like, we want to get this information like written in the contract, which I think is really cool. I mean, personally, I would like to see Flock go away entirely, but I certainly think that would be an improvement, at least, is to get something written down in contract. And then it is worth noting that they mentioned here the whole it's unclear if Flock's cameras will continue recording. They mentioned further down that has been an issue, is a lot of the time these cities are now, this is kind of like the new problem that we're facing in some ways, is a lot of cities are successfully getting rid of Flock. Not all of them, and I really want to know who's paying off those politicians. But a lot of cities are getting rid of Flock. And then there's this new question of like, well, now what happens to the cameras? Because now there's this question of like, okay, who pays to get rid of the cameras? And so the cameras just sit there. And then people are wondering, it's like, okay, but like Flock has always owned everything about those cameras. Like, you're basically renting the cameras from them. You're licensing the cameras, you're licensing the software. It's not like they roll in and they go, okay, here's your data rack and your server rack that goes in your IT closet and it's all yours now. Like, no, it's theirs. They control it, which is where some of this controversy comes from, because then it's like, it's like, oh, they mentioned down here, 404 Media reported that a U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration used a local police officer's password without their knowledge to search for a suspect accused of an immigration violation. And that's without him knowing. Like, the local police are doing search for the feds all the time, and the feds are just, the point is, like, it's remotely accessible anywhere. So if these cameras are still there, they could, at very least in theory, still be recording. I don't know. I'm not going to say if they probably are or not. I don't know, but they could. And they said in this article that in some cases, like the cameras have been removed and then come back. Where did that go? Some locals have taken matters into their own hands by dismantling flock cameras and covering them with trash bags, even as some communities found that flock reinstalled cameras without permission from local authorities. So, yeah, I don't know. This is good. It's really good to see LAPD pushing back. It's really good to see flock facing all this intense criticism. I need to get a good lawyer because I keep saying stuff like this. The flock CEO, in my opinion, is absolutely morally bankrupt and has no moral compass other than money. And so until we start seeing stuff like this happen, these major organizations, because I don't think they care about the little HOA in, backwoods county, Kansas. Like, they don't care about that. But LAPD, that's millions of dollars a year, easily. I guarantee it. So until these bigger police departments and agencies stop using flock, it's not going to hit them in the wallet, and they're not going to change. That's the only way they're going to change. So again, I would like to see them go away entirely, but the fact that LA is at least demanding some sort of contractual improvement here, I guess my only question at that point is we would have to wait and see if it gets enforced. If there's some kind of contract violation, will they actually take flock to court? But now I'm getting like 5 years ahead of myself. So I don't know. I think those are all my thoughts. I think that's the story. Did I miss anything? Do you have any thoughts I missed?
I think it's interesting, like when you talked about like the budget and like how much money is going to flock here. Just so we're on the same page, everybody, the LAPD has a budget of $1.9 billion. Like that's literally like an obscene amount of money, especially just for like a single department, right? So when we talk about like, oh, this flock contract, we're probably talking like hundreds of million, like maybe tens of millions, maybe 100 million. Like it's probably a lot, right? Like this is probably a pretty big contract for them. So like this is kind of a big win. Like this is taking a pretty massive chunk out of Flock's pocket here. And I think it was interesting, this article by Zach Whitaker, he says researchers have identified an uptick in documented cases of motorists being pulled over, detained, and held at gunpoint by police or jailed due to false positives and errors with license plate readers. So we've kind of talked about this a lot, but these systems are like notoriously not very accurate. Yeah, and they're just, they lead to all these sort of problems. And it's good to see that the contract did get cancelled in the end. And especially such a big contract because, like I said before, 1.9 billion, that was in 2023. And apparently they're probably hiring more people, so that's probably going to go up a couple 100 million. So definitely a win there. I think it's definitely interesting. They didn't mention anywhere in the article the contract cost or like how much it would have been for them to lose, but we can kind of speculate, obviously. Yeah, no, this is just kind of a win. I don't really have too much more to add on it.
I do want to add in relation to cost. Yeah, the last city I lived in Texas, was a major city, probably one of the smaller ones in Texas, to be honest, but it was a major city. And I know that our budget, the police department budget for Clearview AI was somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 million a year. So yeah, just to kind of give you an idea of how much this may or may not cost. Yeah, a lot of these mega cities like New York and LA, their police have more budgets than a lot of militaries in other countries. It's wild. But they operated 138 cameras in Los Angeles. I wonder if that's Los Angeles proper or the entire basin. So sorry, I'm on the LA Times. So
yeah, I think it is kind of astounding when you think of the budget. I think people don't realize that states in the United States are like mini countries basically compared to like things in Europe and stuff. So it is kind of a lot of money that this contract was probably, I mean, 2 million for that contract, probably. But yeah, we'll see. We can hope that this continues and, more cities are discontinuing this, because like we've said, this is like really bad for people's privacy, really bad for mass surveillance. I would say maybe put a trash bag over some cameras. I mean, that's probably not a crime, right? I don't know. But yeah, this is sort of creepy stuff. So you can get involved with that. I believe there's a website that's got people organizing. It's called DFlock. So
Deflock.org, I think. Yeah.
dflock.org. Yeah. So yeah, definitely check that out.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, oh wow, the LA Times says the LAPD's automatic license plate reader system includes 248 pole-mounted cameras, 140 cameras mounted on police vehicle roofs, 1,500 cameras installed inside police vehicles, and 7 mobile trailer cameras. Wow, that's, geez. Anyways, no, what was I going to say? Yeah, and not to put too fine a point on it, but just last week we covered a story about a cop in Florida who was abusing all the databases to stalk a girl that turned him down while he was trying to hit on her. So yeah, these things are just so prone to abuse. As far as I know, there's still no studies showing that there's a significant drop in crime due to mass surveillance. So yeah, it's just yikes. But that's all I got.
Dag said states in the EU are literally yeah, that's what I meant. I meant like the countries, like, like I feel like the states in the US are almost like mini countries, but that's what kind of what I was trying to say. I don't know if I said that right, but
it's honestly very similar. I mean, obviously I've never lived in Europe, so I can't say for sure, but from what I understand, it's like states in the US do have a pretty large degree of autonomy. I think our federal government does have a little bit more say than like the EU Commission or whoever in Europe, but it's a very similar system where states have a lot of autonomy. So I mean, everything as simple as tax rates, like even how you register vehicles, how you register to vote. Like some states allow mail-in voting for anybody. Some states you have to be like active duty military. Like it's very patchwork, but yeah. I think we're ready to move on to site updates, unless you had anything you wanted to add to that one.
Cool. No, yeah, let's dive into some site updates here. But I guess before we dive into some privacy of top period trackers, just going to give some quick updates about what we've been working on at Privacy Guides this week. So in case you haven't seen, we put out a new video. This was an interview with Rudy Wang from Cape Mobile. We've had a lot of questions about this service and, people just wanting to know more about it, whether it's trustworthy, whether what they say is actually true. So Jonah kind of sat down with Rudy and asked a lot of questions that I think a lot of people would have. So if you've seen this service, I guess this is very much a US specific video because this isn't something that's available outside the US. So if you're in the US and you have heard of Cape and you're kind of skeptical or you kind of have questions about it, you can check out the video. As always, we're not affiliated with anyone. We don't give the questions beforehand. There was no financial incentive or anything for this video. We just kind of wanted to ask questions and get some responses on how some features work and stuff like that. So if you've had questions about how that works, or you're just skeptical about it and you're not really sure if it's legit or not, I think it could be a good idea to check that out. It's quite a long interview, but you can have a look. There's timestamps for every question in the video, and maybe there'll be something there if you've been considering it. Hopefully that answers some questions that you have.
Cool. Yeah, I've been using Cape. It's worked pretty well for me. Every once in a while, I will have to like reboot my phone. Like just this morning, I went out to get coffee, and for some reason the cell signal was not working, so I just had to reboot my phone, and it popped right up. But Yeah, I have not listened to it yet because it is about an hour long, like you said, but it's definitely it's gonna go in my queue for sure. I cannot wait to listen to that. But that's kind of really the only site update. There was a really quick, we fixed a broken link about data erasure that was in the Linux overview page. But other than that, I mean, it's been I I actually haven't told Jordan this, but I did film the next video. Like we wrote the script, I filmed it. So now I need to do the first cut of that and then send that over to Jordan. But I know you're still working on the video before that. So yeah, we're chugging along at a nice rate, and there is content on the way in addition to this podcast. And that content is made possible by supporters. So you can sign up for a membership or donate at privacyguides.org/donate, or pick up some swag at shop.privacyguides.org. Privacy Guides is a nonprofit which researches and shares privacy-related information and facilitates a community on our forum and matrix where people can ask questions and get advice about staying private online and preserving their digital rights. And now it is time to talk about Cloudflare's latest bot detection plan.
Yes, let's dive into this story here from nerds.xyz. Cloudflare Precursor watches your mouse and keyboard to decide if you're human. Cloudflare wants websites to stop asking visitors to prove they're human with irritating captcha puzzles. Its replacement, however, involves watching how people move, type, scroll, and interact without a page throughout an entire session. Cloudflare's response has basically been to release this new product called Precursor, a behavioral bot management system for Cloudflare Enterprise bot management customers. Instead of checking one login, click, or checkout attempt, Precursor continuously evaluates activity inside the browser to determine whether a visitor appears human. Cloudflare says the system looks at signals such as mouse movement, scrolling rhythm, typing cadence, clipboard activity, page visibility, and whether keyboard events happened while a text field was selected. It does not capture the actual keys being pressed, according to the company. It studies the timing and rhythm instead. So I think the immediate thing from this is a lot more data than what previously they were trying to collect, right? Like before it was like, your mouse movements and how you clicked on a checkbox. That was how the Cloudflare turnstile used to work. And it would also get information about your connection and such to kind of evaluate it. But this is like a lot more invasive because it's checking a lot more parameters to basically identify if you're a human being. And I think this is basically a response to like agentic systems, right? Because people are using agentic browsers and systems to basically automate processes, and a lot of times they're using it for abuse. So basically, just because someone's using an agentic system doesn't mean they're inherently a good actor. So, websites kind of have to crack down on this sort of thing, which is kind of, it's just like another thing that AI is bringing us. Thanks AI again for doing that. So, this is another way for websites to basically determine if you're a bot or not. I think this is, again, like Cloudflare is like one of those companies that has a bit too much control. They have, a large network that is covering a majority of the internet, and basically them becoming like the gatekeeper becomes kind of an issue. But I guess if this all worked like locally, I'm not sure if this would be as much of an issue, but I think just the inherent way that this is described is that this data would have to be collected and analyzed by Cloudflare itself. So it's kind of unfortunate. This is definitely better than Google's way of doing things. Like Google was originally asking you to download an app on your phone, and you need to have like a verified Google Android device to verify your identity with, which I think was definitely worse. So yeah, this is kind of interesting, but also just like a little bit dystopian. the fact that they have to track so much information to determine if you're human or not. But yeah, kind of throwing it back to you here, Nate. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, I think further down, they do say that they try to, where is it here? Cloudflare is emphasizing privacy in its description of Precursor. The company says it collects the minimum information needed to identify automated activity and does not record actual keystrokes. It also says behavioral information is analyzed as aggregate patterns and not connected to login identities, customer accounts, or persistent user profiles. But the author goes on to say those protections are important, but the privacy concern is still difficult to ignore. And it says software that continually measures mouse movements, typing cadence, clipboard activity, focus changes, and page visibility may feel invasive even when it does not capture the content being typed. So yeah, it's definitely, I don't know. Cloudflare is, my complaints with Cloudflare are different than most people. I actually have more complaints about the amount of centralization, that one of their engineers will accidentally push bad code and crash a third of the internet, and now people are stranded in the airport. But I mean, this is still, yeah, it's like I don't know. Even when you aggregate this kind of data, I still feel like there's got to be ways for it to be de-anonymized. There's got to be concerns with how it's stored. Because I mean, it has to be stored individually so that you can discard old data, right? Like you can't just have this pool where you just keep throwing everything. It'll be like water. It'll mix together. How do you know what the old water is? And I don't know. It's just, yeah, I'm not really a fan of this, but I do wonder what trying to get around this is going to look like. Cause I know that, for example, with like uBlock Origin, for example, if you disable JavaScript entirely, sometimes captchas just won't load at all. And then you just can't get onto the website. So yeah, it's frustrating because this is like a cat and mouse thing where, there were bots on the internet. So then we added captchas, but then the bots learned how to do the captchas. So now we're doing something else. And it's, yeah, I don't know. It sucks. I don't think I have much more to say than that. It just sucks. Not a fan.
Yeah, I think the main issue that like you kind of touched on it a bit, but like I think the main issue is people don't really like that like the entire internet is centralized on Cloudflare. Especially I think Cloudflare is, everyone kind of knows it's like, an American corporation. I think a lot of like companies in Europe are like becoming skeptical of these sort of things, trying to not have everything be routed through a company like that. I think also the issue with this sort of system is that it locks people into a captcha-based system, right? Like if you set this up on your website, then it kind of locks you into continually paying for this forever to protect your website. And yeah, I don't know. I don't think Cloudflare is as bad as every other company we talk about. Like we talk about like Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Meta, like they're all really bad. And Cloudflare is definitely less bad. So, not letting them off the hook, but like they're definitely not as bad as those companies. But I think it does seem like this is a good faith attempt at stopping this sort of thing. But, obviously we're going to have issues when it's collecting, like Nate said, a bunch of information that is, in the broader scheme of things, somewhat unnecessary. But I guess there has got to be a way for websites to protect themselves against these bots and like agentic systems. So I'm not really sure what the solution would be that doesn't collect this much information. Yeah, it kind of just is a really crappy situation.
Yep. All right. Well, if that's all we got, I think we'll move on to this next story from Mozilla. All righty. So this will be a fun one. This is some research from Mozilla that says, well, sort of from Mozilla, that says your period data should be private. This is sort of from Mozilla because they actually work together with the Transparency Hub at Harvard's Berkman Klein Center and the Siebel School of Computing and Data Science at the University of Illinois to examine historical changes to the privacy policies and provide additional Android testing. So, I mean, I'm actually going to read what they wrote because it's pretty short and I think it's pretty good. So it says the data we keep on our phones is sensitive. For women, period data is one of the most sensitive data points we share with our device. That's because period tracking apps aren't just about when your period happens. Apps in this space ask you to log extremely intimate details so it can predict your cycle or help you get pregnant, from when you bleed, but also when you've had late night chocolate craving and even when you have a miscarriage. In a post-Dobbs landscape, we believe safeguarding this data and keeping it private is more important than ever. Our privacy expert Shoshana Wodinsky did hands-on testing of 6 popular period tracking apps: Yuki, Clue, Flow, Period Calendar, Planned Parenthood, Spot On, and Stardust. We discovered data sharing to analytics companies, privacy washing, but also a standout option when it comes to keeping data safe. So you can see here that they did like a 10 out of, or a 10-point scale. Yuki got a perfect 10. And for the record, if you click these, if you go to the website, which Jordan mentioned earlier, this should all be in the newsletter that you can go see, privacyguides.org/live streams, plural, I think. I usually get that wrong. I think it's plural, but yeah, you'll find the link in there. And Yuki, if you click on it, it'll take you, oh yeah, it's going to load right in here. Actually, it'll take you to a full expanded, should I trust their default settings? What personal data do they collect? What's their track record, the good and the bad, so on and so forth. And they do that for each one of them. So yeah, Flow is a very popular one I've heard of. Stardust is a very popular one because they've all got pretty websites, but Stardust actually rated the worst, 2 out of 10. Yuki is one we do recommend on Privacy Guides. And that is all, I believe, entirely on device. I think there's even ways to like lock it down to like make the data erase if you need to. I could be wrong about that, but yeah, it's pretty cool, I guess. I'm a cis male. I've never used any of these myself, but I know my wife has come to me a few times about like, hey, I've heard about this one. Have you, what do you know about this? Clue is one that I'm particularly mad at because that was one that she heard about and came to me and was like, hey, could you look into this for me? And their marketing on their website is all like, oh, we can't turn over data. But then when you read their privacy policy, it's like, we use these 20 analytics companies and 18 of them are based in the US. And so I'm particularly pissed off at them because I feel like they're really lulling users into a false sense of security. But oh, Flow has an AI chatbot. How cute. I'm sure there's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, this is just, I mean, like I said, like health data in general is really sensitive. And I feel like this is another area. There's a lot of areas where I'm going to get on my soapbox here. There's a lot of areas where privacy developers, and I feel bad when I criticize developers because again, I don't know any code, so I cannot be part of the solution here. But there's a lot of areas where privacy developers focus too much attention. Like I swear to God, you can throw a rock and hit 10 encrypted messengers. But then there's other like very simple, like there's not a lot of to-do lists out there. There's not a lot of really good quality. There's like one calorie tracker that looks like it was built in like 2003. There's not a lot of, I'm trying to think what else there. I don't know. There's also like 10 million Bible apps for some reason. I'm not sure why that is. I don't really care. I just find that interesting that if you go to F-Droid, there's like a million Bible apps. But it's just, there's certain things in privacy that are overrepresented and certain things that are underrepresented. And I feel like health in general is one of those things where we just don't have enough good quality health options out there. So I don't know. It's good to know that Yuki did well. I think there's a couple others we recommend on the website. But yeah, if you, I'm assuming most of us, unless you are an extreme hermit, probably know at least a few women. Definitely go ahead and send this to your friends, send this to your family, and let them know about this kind of stuff. But I don't know that I have anything too specific to add to this story. I just thought it was a really important story that deserved to be mentioned. And I'm glad that our recommendation performed so well.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely good to see that things are, our rigorous process is also, being approved and confirmed, which is great. I think I do want to add here, kind of quickly, I don't know, this article mentions like women a lot. Like, I just want to mention like, not just women, like just people that menstruate, just saying, you got to be a bit more inclusive there. I think the interesting thing here is, some of the stuff that they talk about that kind of goes over my head. And, maybe this is something that people who don't menstruate don't realize. Um, I don't know how much you can talk about this, obviously, because this is more of a US thing. This is not really a thing in Australia. But what is kind of the risks with this? Because as I understand it, there's quite a situation regarding like abortion and stuff. Like, is this really as risky as the article is saying? Like, regarding that sort of stuff?
So, I don't know how qualified I am to talk on this because I have not been following it closely, but okay, this is purely personal opinion. Well, okay, this part's not. So post Dobbs is talking about, so in the 60s, we had this case in the US called Roe versus Wade. And basically what the US Supreme Court decided that, and this is true, which is going to lead to the opinion part. Basically, they said that the government does not have a right to a woman's body, and that is like a privacy issue, and like it's not really the government's place to tell somebody that they can't get an abortion, and that effectively legalized abortion in the U.S. for decades until a few years ago when somebody challenged it, and the Supreme Court, who is now stacked with conservative judges, decided, you know what? Yeah, this is not something that the federal government should decide on. This is something that should be decided at the state level. And then all of a sudden, a whole bunch of conservative states raced to introduce anti-abortion laws. Texas decided to make a point out of one particular woman. I will die on that hill. The opinion part that I want to throw out there is I really think this was the wrong way. Even if you think abortion is murder, I don't think this was the right way to go about that. Because again, the Supreme Court said this is about the government saying they don't have a right to your body. And I think that's a really weird one that you want to fight to get your way. But I digress. Yeah, so I don't know how much it has been exercised. Like, it's definitely, we've definitely seen situations where I don't know that they're necessarily privacy related. But again, okay, so in Texas, there was a lady that I might have the finer details here wrong, but basically, like, I think okay, forgive me if I get the details wrong, but it's not too far off from this. The fetus is not going to be born. I mean, this was a long time ago, so I should be talking past tense, but like the fetus was not going to be born, period. But no doctor was willing to operate because they knew that they would get in legal trouble for like performing an abortion, even though medically she needed it. And there was zero chance that the fetus was going to survive. And if they don't operate, there's a pretty good chance she won't survive either. And Ken Paxton still refused to make an exception for them because like nobody wanted it. So like they literally put someone's life at risk just to make a statement out of her to make this an anti-abortion thing. So this is having like real impacts on people and their lives. And it's, I don't know. Again, I have not kept too close of an eye on this, so I don't know exactly how many privacy invasions this has resulted in, but I do know that this is definitely like, it basically chipped away at your protections from the government for privacy. So yeah, it's not great. And it's, again, this is one of those things that the Supreme Court decided is now a state issue. So some states have still legalized abortion. Some states have not. Some states you can with certain caveats. Like if it was a sexual assault that resulted in the child, it's, yeah, I don't know. It's a whole, it's a mess. It's a mess. But I think people are right to be worried about it because if you live in one of those red states and one of these apps decides that, like if you had a miscarriage, you could look at the metadata of the app and it could suggest that maybe you had an abortion. You know, it's like, it's one of those things where the metadata can sometimes tell a misleading story. So it's definitely something that I think people at very least should have on their radar and should pay attention to, regardless of their political beliefs, because there's no protections there anymore. So I don't know. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, I think it's good you bring it back to like the privacy aspect, right? Like this is important data that could put people at significant risk, right? Because no matter how you feel about abortion, this data is, if someone wants to get an abortion, then, that data is kind of could be problematic, could mean that they get jailed. Like this is kind of a significant issue, right? Like this is, sort of data that could put you in prison, basically.
So
right?
take it with a grain of salt, because this is the AI summary from Brave. But according to the AI summary, there have been criminal prosecutions and data subpoenas because the Roe v. Wade protections are no longer in place. They said there was a Mississippi mother who was accused of murder after investigators used her online search history for abortion medications as evidence following a stillbirth. And for the record, these are summaries. I don't know if these people are actually guilty of anything or not. In another case, prosecutors secured a 20-year sentence that was later overturned by using a woman's text messages to argue her miscarriage was self-induced abortion. A Texas man utilized his wife's private text messages regarding abortion pills to file a civil lawsuit against her and her friends. So yeah, I mean, this is definitely having an impact for sure. So yeah.
Yeah, I think as well, I believe a former team member, intern, Kevin, I believe, wrote an article reviewing all sorts of these period tracking apps, which I'll just kind of bring this back to the tools here. This is on our health and wellness page. We recommend Drip, Yuki, like the one Nate mentioned, and also Apple Health for menstrual cycle tracking. So if that's something that, if you've been using like Flow, Clue, Period Calendar, I know there's a lot of different ones. That's definitely check out our recommendations. It's worth it, especially if you're, living in a situation where you could be at risk. I think this is an easy switch for that. They do allow import of data as well, so you can export your data from those other less private apps, import it in. I think it's definitely important to be concerned about that, and not to become complacent, because I think that's probably the most concerning thing about that situation, just like how quickly things can change, and how quickly things that you took for granted can disappear. So, don't become complacent, because stuff that's legal today may not be. Why do you think Apple Health is private enough? Henrique asked in the chat. The main reason is because it uses end-to-end encryption. With syncing, you also don't have to sync it either. And basically no other app offers syncing with end-to-end encryption. The other two apps are both offline, so they don't sync at all, which can be an issue. But Apple is basically the only company that does end-to-end encryption on like health records and fitness data. It is what it is. It's the best that we have. Apple has problems as well. I think, be careful with that. I think syncing the data is also more risky as well. And I believe that is something that Kevin did mention in that article. So just be aware of that too. And I don't know. It's tricky. You got to use the best tool. I was talking about that to my sister, but she ignored. I mean, you got to pick your battles, I guess. Sometimes some people don't get super engaged on something unless, they're personally invested in it, which kind of sucks. But we've talked about this a lot, but like, getting people to care about these issues is definitely something that doesn't happen overnight. So, keep subtly pushing someone in the direction, and maybe they'll finally understand.
Yeah, and something I want to add on to that is definitely try to resist the urge to "I told you so," which I feel it too, for the record, when like people that normally say they, oh, I have nothing to hide, whatever, and then something happens and they come running to you and they're like, oh my God, what do I do? And it's like, well, if you'd have listened to me a year ago, you wouldn't be in this situation. But try not to do that, because then they're just not going to come back to you next time. So Yeah, it sucks. It really does suck that most people don't care until they're in the fire. And then at that point, they just want, like, it's like doxing, right? Like, people will come to you and they're like, oh my God, I'm being doxed. What do I do? And it's like, what do you want me to do? I can't take the information off the internet. Like, yeah, there's stuff we can try to do, but I mean, really, unless you're going to move, there's nothing we can really do but wait for it to blow over. And it sucks, but it is what it is. I was going to say, I'm pretty sure my wife is using Yuki, and I think she was pretty happy with it. So, yeah.
I will also say these apps do a lot more than just period tracking. So if you need tracking for any sort of like sexual health stuff, definitely check it out. Even just tracking mood stuff, it's good as well. So yeah, not only for people that menstruate, but yeah, definitely worth checking out if you're using something that's less private.
Yeah, I was going to say it's helped her understand a lot more because, since it's like hormone related, like sometimes she's just naturally more tired and other times she has more energy, and just being able to track that has helped her with that stuff too. So, I think that's all we've got for stories so far.
Awesome. Cool. I guess we can roll into some forum updates then. In a minute, we'll start taking viewer questions. So if you've been holding on to any questions about any of the stories we've been talking about so far, go ahead and start leaving them on the forum thread or in the comments section on the live stream. But for now, let's check in on our community forum. There's always a lot of activity on the forum, but here's one particular thread that we thought was worth highlighting this week. So I'll give a quick overview and then I'll throw it back to you, Nate. Briar is in maintenance mode. This is a post from the Briar project. This is a quick update about the status of Briar. Short version, the project is still active, but we're only making essential security updates and bug fixes for now. I guess the long version, for several years, we've been trying to find solutions to some of the long-standing issues with Briar, such as high battery usage, unreliable background operation on Android, missing features like account backup and file attachments, and a difficult user experience for adding contacts and communicating offline. We considered completely rebuilding the application from the ground up, or even splitting it into a separate application for online and offline use. Meanwhile, the project didn't have funding. We were reluctant to look for funding without having a long-term plan, and so we could only work on Briar in our spare time. Last year, we decided that we wouldn't realistically be able to solve these issues, and so we reluctantly decided to shut down the project. We worked on releasing a final update for Android and desktop to allow the app to remain functional for as long as possible. In the meantime, we were hearing a lot of supportive words from people who we had told about the decision. The app continued to attract new users. So finally, we decided to continue the project in maintenance mode. We're only making essential security updates and bug fixes for now, but eventually we hope to make some incremental progress on these long-standing issues. We're sending out this update because some rumors have been circulating that the project is shutting down based on conversations we had with people in the internet freedom and privacy community last year. These rumors are out of date. The project is continuing. All right. What do you think, Nate?
I think that's good. I know a minute ago I was just like, oh my God, there's too many messengers. But it's the reason I think there's too many messengers is because I think a lot of them are not meaningfully reinventing the wheel. Not that every messenger has to be like completely unique from the ground up, but a lot of them it's like, oh, it's just a different UI, or like it routes through I to P instead of Tor or whatever. And it does all these little things that, for the record, I guess, I mean, that's important to somebody. But again, I think there's other places developers should be focusing their attention, in my opinion. But Briar is one of those ones that, I mean, I think like my only beef with Briar is that it's not available on iOS, I don't think. So Briar actually has a unique niche, which is that it can function offline. It can function peer-to-peer. Like, the only time I've really used it personally is sometimes my wife and I will fly, and because I am very cheap, I will not spring the extra money to make sure that we get seats together. And usually you can just ask somebody and they'll switch, like, hey, do you mind if I have your seat so I can sit next to my wife or whatever? It's usually her asking, actually. But Sometimes we can't do that, and so we'll use Briar to like keep in touch while we're on the plane and we don't have cell signal, and which is pretty interesting. But there's other actual use cases. If you're in an area, like I could see this being useful in especially foreign countries. Like, was it Venezuela recently that had like really bad earthquakes? Like, when you get outside the US and Europe, the Android adoption rate is so much higher. And so a situation like that would be great for something like Briar. If you live in a country that has a really bad infrastructure, it could be great for something like Briar. So yeah, I'm really glad to see that they are going to stick around, even if it's just maintenance mode. And I hope that they will be able to get the resources they need to keep developing. Because like they mentioned, there are some things that do genuinely need improvement, better battery life. I mean, the UI, in my opinion, could use a little bit of an update. And I'm sure there's a whole host of things from people that actually use the project regularly. But yeah, I think it's really cool. I'm happy they're not going away. And I hope they will be able to get whatever they need to resume full development as soon as possible. I think that's my takeaway.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think this has definitely been one of those apps that like we saw in Iran, there was like a whole internet shutdown, right? Like, you're not going to be able to use Signal if the entire internet is down. Having an app that can operate without accessing the internet is kind of important. And Enrique said probably simple X is enough for most people. No, because like if the internet infrastructure is down, then you're kind of, what are you going to do? So if you don't have internet, that's why I think something like this is so important.
Alrighty. I mean, yeah, I didn't really have much else to add to that. I also think I wanted to include this story just because Briar is one of our recommended tools, and they said rumors are going around that it's shutting down. So I guess I kind of wanted to signal boost that a little bit. But if that's all you have, I think that's all I have for that one. So
yeah, I've never actually met anyone that used Briar before, so I've never actually used it, but it does seem really cool.
Yeah, like I said, I've only used it in small bursts, but it's interesting to me for sure. Especially, I was a little disappointed once I moved to Android, and I was like, oh, now I have access to things like Briar, and like you said, like nobody uses it, but which is a bummer because it's cool. But yeah, it takes a hit on your battery life for sure. But I think with that, we'll move into our Q&A segment. So we're going to start with our questions on the forum from our paying members. If you want to get priority in the Q&A, you can become a member by going to privacyguides.org/donate, or anywhere on privacyguides.org, you can click the red heart icon in the top right corner of the page. We did actually have one question that somebody left, I think, after we started streaming. It says, what are your thoughts on private message sharing? They say people will often share screenshots of messages between other people, whether that be in public groups or private messages. From people wanting to respect others' privacy, should we call this out more? Are there any factors that would make this okay, such as the person you are sharing them with, for example, a partner versus a large group? What else do you see people do that, despite being privacy invasive of others, often gets overlooked? I don't know about that last part. That kind of puts me on the spot. But yeah, I think it's very contextual. I think, personally speaking, I think I don't know. I think it's a gray area because on the one hand, I think anything you do in a public space is kind of public, and you should not necessarily expect privacy. And I think that's a little bit different from like a right to be forgotten. Like personally, I really love that Mastodon has the ability to automatically erase old content, and I wish I would see that on more websites and services, because I think that's a great thing. Like personally, if I saw a screenshot in a public place, like a public Discord or a website, I would be okay to share that on Mastodon, because I know that in 3 months it's not going to be on my account anymore. So it's not like I'm selling somebody out there. Although I guess Web Archive exists potentially. I think it's also different. Yeah, like my wife tells me everything. We tell each other everything. So I mean, saying like, "Hey, this person messaged this," I think is kind of a given. In my opinion, personally, but I think it's very contextual. I don't think if it's a one-to-one message, I don't think you should necessarily be sharing it with like like on the forum or something. And I don't know. It's really contextual of like what it is. You know, I usually ask people, to be honest. I'm like, hey, do you mind if I share this? And I'll like censor certain information, or I mentioned before, I have a friend who's in law enforcement that shares information with me sometimes, and I will purposely never copy and paste him or screenshot him. I will like paraphrase what he said, because even like his speech patterns, I don't want that to get out there. So I don't know. I think it's definitely something that people should think about a little more. If you're just too lazy to paraphrase the information or something, it's really depends on what the information is. I think. I don't know. I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, it definitely makes sense. I think you have to be very careful about sharing stuff that has been shared with you in private. I think some people definitely have this idea that there's no consent required for that. Like you'll take a photo with somebody and then suddenly they'll post it on every social media platform, post it everywhere publicly and link your identity to it. It's like, no, we need to normalize, we need to normalize asking for consent and not just doing stuff because we think it's fine. Because maybe you're fine with that, but maybe they're not. Like, you have to ask instead of just assuming. I guess bring it back to this person's question. Yeah, I think you kind of just have to do as much as you can. Like, if you're going to share someone else's messages, which I feel like you should ask them first if that's okay. Black out their username, black out their profile picture. Um, get their approval first. Don't just share like text messages from someone or messages from someone that you um, and I even think, maybe this will be a hot take, but don't share like messages from an ex-partner. Like especially if you're not talking to them anymore, like it's not right. I don't like those sort of things where people just like share private messages with their partners that they don't have anymore. Like that does feel like, just because you're not in a relationship with that person anymore doesn't mean you can just disregard their consent completely. But yeah, I don't really have any more to add on that. I mean, there's some questions here coming in on the live stream. Do you think Graphene OS? Oh, Henrique said, I said on the internet. Yeah, exactly. So Simple X is definitely a good option online, and Bri is good for offline. Do you think Graphene OS desktop mode is better than having a desktop? No, I think it's definitely got issues. Again, I don't have like the latest Google Pixel, so maybe it's become better or it's supported a bit better on the Pixel 10. But on my Pixel 9, it is very low resolution. I think it's 720p, and it's not very intuitive either. So I would say it's not ready, but like if you need something and that's the only device that you have, then sure, go for it. But I would say most likely go for something else. Probably not going to be as secure as Graphene OS. Dag Overhaul said cubes, question mark, smiley face. Which, I think that's definitely a different sort of thing. You're not going to get access. It's a much more virtualization heavy system with much stronger containerization and like separation. So that obviously comes with some drawbacks. I do feel like the average person is not going to want to put up with that. It's also very complicated to use. I think it's not super intuitive. So yeah, it's kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the security thing, because that was my thought. I know I've said in the past, this came from one of Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons guests. I can't remember who it was, and it was several years ago at this point, so I'm not even going to go look. But he was talking about mobile phones, and he said that from a security perspective, we kind of learned from the mistakes that we made on desktop. So there is much better like sandboxing and like I guess you would technically call it an atomic upgrading system, because like, when's the last time you saw a phone like fail to upgrade and update and break itself? Like it's really, really rare. So it's very they're kind of solving different problems. But yeah, my first thought is just performance. Like, I don't know if I would trust even like a pro version of a Pixel. Like, I don't know if I would trust it to handle games very well. I wouldn't trust it to handle video editing very well, although I hear the MacBook Neo does okay for some basic video editing. So yeah, at this time, I think it's just kind of like the right tool for the right job. Like, if you just need something to browse the internet, watch YouTube videos, check your email, then yeah, sure, it'll probably work just fine. But for like serious desktop tasks, desktop tasks, I don't know if I said that right. Yeah, I don't know if I would. For me, I don't think it would use it. I want to address this. He said having a proper desktop has problems like Intel ME and AMD PSP. Okay, hot take. Personal hot take here. This is not an official privacy guide stance. I wrote a blog post a long time ago. I cannot find a single piece of evidence that Intel ME is actually problematic. It is absolutely problematic just from a principle standpoint of like, why is this thing running at ring 0 and why does it have such elevated permissions? But like, there has never been a documented case of anybody being hacked. There's let me see if I can find it real quick. But like, I literally went looking. I spent like a couple days researching this, and I could not find. Yeah, so I called it the not so scary truth behind Intel ME, and if it'll load, they say that it's like this backdoor built in and whatnot, but it's just nobody has ever called it. It's coming back to me now a little bit. It's still loading, but like, oh, it's not going to load because that's blog, isn't it? Okay, hold on. God dang it. Even in Wikipedia, if you go to Wikipedia and it says like, oh, this person accused it of being a backdoor, and if you click the link and read it, the word backdoor does not appear anywhere in the article that they cite. So to me, it's very much a case of like this hypothetical, like it could be bad, but there are no documented cases. It's never been. It's basically, I think it's one of those things that's overblown a little bit. It's like, sure, try to avoid it if you can. It would be a lot better if it wasn't there. I'm not going to argue that. But I think it's one of those cases where like people have really taken it. It's become like a fear mongering thing where it's like, oh, it's the worst thing ever. And it's like, no, it just, I don't know. I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but I think too many people, because especially there's scripts that'll like remove Intel ME and half of them will break your computer. And so it's just, yeah, I don't know. The web address has actually changed, so I might post this in like the Q&A thread just so people can find it. But yeah, I think it's been kind of overblown personally. But again, for the record, that is a personal opinion. That is not official stance from privacy guides, but yeah.
I guess to kind of back that up with our recommendations here, we don't recommend using Linux Libre kernel and Libre distributions. And the main reason for that is they basically strip out microcode updates, which, they're kind of important from a security perspective. And they also remove security mitigations, and they also suppress kernel warnings about vulnerable microcode, which is just not good from a privacy perspective. And the Libre distributions and stuff are probably the ones you're going to want to use if you're worried about like Intel ME and AMD PSP. So, that's kind of where we're standing on it. We don't really have any, as far as I'm aware, there's no, recommendations for alternative bootloaders such as like LibreBoot or Coreboot. Those have other separate issues, but when it comes to operating systems and stuff, I think there's, like Nate said, I think there is some a little bit of overblowing going on, but I think it's certainly something to think about. I think it comes back to like people threat modeling, right? If you're Edward Snowden and the American government is trying to track you down and they're going to use every possible avenue, which would include that sort of software. And Henrique says, using Arch with AppArmor and UFW for a security perspective is good enough. I think I would recommend looking at our Linux overview page, which you can find in the knowledge base and under operating systems. That's going to have a lot more information about things that you should be doing, especially with Arch, because it is so customizable. Like, you could make it really insecure, or you could make it quite secure. So definitely check that out. Dag also said Secure Blue. We did do like a video about that as well last year. That's another one we recommend.
It's like one of our most viewed videos.
Possibly, yes. Linux stuff generally does really well. There's some extra tips in the Linux overview page specifically about Arch-based distributions, so definitely read that. I think, Linux is going to be significantly better from a privacy perspective than Windows and Mac, so that's basically the main reason that we would suggest it. Definitely, if you watch the Secure Blue video, you'll get a better understanding about like the security issues with Linux itself. But yeah, kind of everything I had to cover on that.
I might repost this blog post over on my Ghost now that I'm kind of migrating stuff over there. So
okay, sounds good.
It's not really a question, but when we were talking about the period tracker apps, Dag said, remember that gay priest that was outed by conservative groups buying his data from brokers? Yeah. I think just kind of goes back to showing how sensitive data can be. And yeah, I think they tracked his location or something that was being sold by Grindr and saw that he was going to gay bars. So yeah, sensitive data, worth protecting. But I think that's all I saw for questions. I don't know if anybody has any more last minute questions.
Yeah, we did forget this week. We've been trying to ask for questions in our privacy guide supporter Signal group chat. If you're a supporter, you can join that, and a couple of team members are in there just to answer questions and chat about stuff. But we kind of have been wanting to use that as a way to get questions from our supporters and give them priority and stuff. We'll make sure we get that onto that next week, but we did forget this week. So, but if there's anyone in there now that wants to leave a question, feel free to do so. When is Windows hardening article going to be released? There's already a knowledge base article about Windows, Windows overview page, which does have some information. It doesn't have a huge amount of stuff, but it does have some things already. Like it's got a couple of sections, which I believe are still coming soon, which is the initial installation, privacy settings, application sandboxing, and security hardening. But like we said, like Privacy Guides is like a volunteer project. Apart from Nate and I believe Jonah, like there's not really, we're doing work on video stuff, and everything else is kind of volunteer run. So it's whoever has time, which, it's already kind of a lot to juggle because we're doing so many things at the same time. It's basically that we can't really set a deadline on when that's going to be done. It's whoever wants to work on it, whoever has time. And, sometimes that doesn't always happen, but we try our best to handle everything. And I think we've been pretty good about that because we previously didn't have operating system overview pages, but we do now. I'm not sure who was the major catalyst behind a lot of these. It looks like it was Jonah, Daniel Gray, Redoomed. A couple of those members were working on those websites, on those sections of the website. It looks like this one was mainly Jonah and Daniel. So, you can submit, stuff like this. You can join the discussion on our forum. You can help to build out the site and add resources. I think that's kind of it. There is recommendations for other operating systems as well that we don't recommend. So definitely check that out. There's macOS, there's iOS, and like we we're talking about, there's Windows as well. So yeah, check it out. Maybe help try and build that out if you have time or if you want to contribute.
Yeah, I know Jonah was working on a credit freeze guide recently. I'm not sure what the latest on that is, but there is new content on the way. I think we're always trying to keep the website up to date and add new stuff. You know, privacy's an ever evolving thing, right? So there's always going to be updates and changes and good stuff. I mean, I actually just this week I was because we talked about that Windows Global ID thing last week, and there was a I think you found it, if I remember correctly. There was an article that finally had like a lot more. I mean, it still wasn't much, but it was more information than any of the other articles up until that point that talked about like what it is and what it submits and how to disable it. And so when I went to go check my computer, I noticed that like some of the settings have changed names. So even just little things like that. But real quick, Henrik said, I don't use Windows, but like my grandpa wouldn't switch to Linux very easily. So this is not an official recommendation, but I know Zorin OS was really popular when Windows 10 stopped getting support, because when you install it, you can pick if you want it to look like Mac or Windows. And so for some people, that would be a transition towards Linux. Again, that's not one of our official recommendations because it's based on Ubuntu and there are more secure distros out there like the ones we've been talking about, but it might be like a good intermediate step to get somebody over towards Linux possibly. I need to check out Zorin myself. It's been a while.
Definitely does look interesting. Not seeing too many other things here, unless anyone else who's also watching right now has anything that you want us to talk about. Any news stories that you've seen, any questions you have about the website or what we've been working on, definitely drop that. I guess there's also been some more interesting threads on the forum, which I think we could maybe talk about one more to kind of give people a little bit more time to leave questions. I think we had 2 or 3 that we were thinking, but we ended up kind of choosing to go with that main one about Briar, but we could just do one more here if you feel like it, Nate.
Yeah, I'm down. Did any of them jump out at you specifically, or?
I think we could talk about maybe smart TV tracking. I mean, we talked about that a bit. There's one about Windows steering users to Edge. I don't know. Too much Microsoft bashing this week?
Oh, there's no such thing. Yeah, I mean, so there was a report. Let me see if I can find that one. There was a report this week from Mozilla, so you know, take it with a grain of salt, but it's also not exactly hard to believe that that Microsoft still. So I mean, this isn't really like quote unquote news per se, but Microsoft has been accused of pulling a lot of dark patterns, which for those who don't know, dark patterns are what we call it when like it's one click to sign up for a service, but you have to email customer service to close your account. They call that a dark pattern because they're trying to nudge you into doing something that benefits the company and not you. And so, yeah, Windows has long been accused of using dark patterns to make you use like their browser, Edge specifically. I'll be honest, I've never really noticed. Maybe it's because of all the changes I make to Windows, but like I've heard people talk about like okay, so the only dark pattern that I have is no matter how many times I uninstall Edge, it comes back, which is why I just have it firewalled now so it can never connect. But you know, people talk about like they set their default browser to like Brave or Firefox, and then they update Windows and it goes back to being Edge or something like that. And I've personally never experienced that, but they according to Mozilla, Microsoft still does not allow users to download, set as the default, or keep using alternative browsers without harmful interference. This might take the form of an all you need is right here banner in Bing when attempting to download alternative browsers. I don't know who's using Bing even in Edge. The pre-pinning of Edge to the Windows taskbar, and the misleading wording, which according to the report could trick users into making Edge their default. And then there's the AI. The authors found that Copilot ignores the default browser when opening links, and that Copilot data shares toggles are pre-selected on in the US and India. I mean, why is that surprising? Again, who uses Copilot? It's terrible. It's like the worst AI, except maybe Grok, but I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's really like, somebody asked earlier, it's like, why don't people just switch to Linux? And like, there are valid reasons to be stuck on Windows, but I definitely think it's one of those things, because I think a lot of the time people just don't challenge their assumptions, like there's all kinds of, there's all kinds of like brain teasers and mental, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but like they're tricks basically that kind of like trick you into like A or B. And it's like, well, if you stop and think about it for a minute, there's also option C. It just wasn't explicitly stated. And I think a lot of the time we do that to ourselves, where it's like, oh, I have to be on Windows. But if you stop and think about it for a little bit, it's like, actually, I could do this in the browser. I could replace this with some other open source thing. And, if I did this and this, like, well, at very least, I could dual boot Linux, and I could use Linux 90% of the time and Windows 10% of the time. It's so I would just say I would use this as an opportunity to ask yourself that question. Are you really stuck on Windows, or is it one of those things where it's like, actually, I could reduce my dependency a little bit? So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that this is so different across different regions. I think it kind of makes sense because, the EU economic region is like much more, I think they're definitely much more focused on like bringing in like stopping these monopolies and stuff like that in some cases, I guess, which, it's made things a little bit better. Like, I'll just share this on screen. Um, this is kind of what the report was, a graphic from the report. Basically, even in the EU, there's still lots of hoops that you have to go through. It looks like the US is the worst out of all of them. The UK is slightly better, like slightly. Yeah, UK, like USA and India are basically the same, and the UK is slightly better. So, still a lot of things that it's doing though. You can see here just like tricks that they're using to get people to use Edge. This is really pretty sinister stuff, to kind of get people to use this. And I think most people are not super aware of these tactics, which is what makes it kind of even more insidious, I think. And these are things that, like, unless you've been trained to know exactly what is happening, like you've always, I think we've all gone through the process of trying to cancel something. Well, I guess if you live in a country that doesn't have protections against that, then you've been through this process where, you try and cancel something and the cancel button is really hard to see, or it's like really small, and then like the opt out, like the oh no, actually I want to keep my subscription button is really big and blue and clickable. It's all those sort of tricks that they're using to get people to use this. And I hope hope something can happen with this. I don't think this should be like limited to some specific economic region. It's like with the Apple stuff, being able to access those third-party app stores and stuff. I don't think that should be like limited by if you live in the EU or not. It should be like a global thing, ideally. But I think, especially when it comes to these super gigantic corporations, they can kind of split things and develop different versions of operating systems because they just have so much money and so much time to develop alternatively like this. Yeah, I don't know. It's frustrating. Windows is really bad. Yeah, I don't really have too much more to add on this one.
The only thing I want to add, Henry Kier said, you can edit some of the files and make your computer be like it was configured in the EU, and then it won't reinstall. I hear you, and I'm not yelling at you, but like, it shouldn't be that way. And I mean, this is normally something I complain about other developers and Linux people about, but like, it's not. I mean, you've been saying yourself that like you have family members that are not tech savvy and like won't switch to Linux and stuff. It's like you really expect them to go in and edit the configuration, the registry and stuff like that. Like, I don't know. I know you're probably not defending Microsoft, but it's just, yeah, to me, that's like, that's not a solution to me. It's, I'm looking at, I reposted something from Mastodon recently. It said, OMG, you don't like the textiles that are available? Just go shear a sheep, gather stinging nettles, skirt the fleece, ret the stalks to get at the vast fibers, make a spindle, spin the fiber, build a loom, disassemble a bike wheel to make knitting pins, weave your own cloth, knit your own socks, sew a tunic, go live in a bog without any human contact because all of this takes too much time for being social. By the way, this post is about technology. And yeah, I think sometimes we have that attitude. So I don't know. That's a whole nother rant that I could get on. That is neither here nor there. But good old dark patterns. Not as cool as they sound, you know. Usually you put dark in something and it sounds really cool, but
not cool when you're the one being manipulated. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I bet you it's great for all the C-suites at Microsoft that are making bank. Make more money in a week than I make in a year.
Yeah, probably a day even. It is kind of interesting though that this is like, you know, not being curbed in any way. Like I feel like this is obviously like monopoly behavior. Don't know what's going on with that, but I guess I don't know. I guess there's not really any I guess this would be more of a US thing, maybe. Maybe. Like it kind of depends. I feel like if there was enough pressure from outside of the US, there would be pressure for that to change. But I guess it is kind of something that the US has to work out, which seems like you haven't been particularly focused on at the moment.
Oh, don't even get me started about where our priorities are in this country right now. I digress. Were there any other forum threads you wanted to talk about, or is that all we got for this week?
Yeah, no, I think we can probably close things out unless, yeah, no one seems to have any other questions. Yeah, sounds good.
Alrighty. All the updates from This Week in Privacy will be shared on the blog every week, so be sure to sign up for the newsletter or subscribe with your favorite RSS reader if you want to stay tuned. For people who prefer audio, we also offer a podcast available on all podcast platforms and RSS, and this video will be synced to PeerTube. Privacy Guides is an impartial nonprofit organization that is focused on building a strong privacy advocacy community and delivering the best digital privacy and consumer technology rights advice on the internet. If you want to support our mission, then you can make a donation on our website at privacyguides.org/donate. To make a donation, click the red heart icon located in the top right corner of any page. You can contribute using standard fiat currency via debit or credit card, or you can opt to donate anonymously using Monero or your favorite cryptocurrency. Becoming a paid member unlocks exclusive perks like early access to video content and priority during the live stream Q&A. You'll also get a cool badge on your profile in the Privacy Guides forum and the warm, fuzzy feeling of supporting independent media. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next week.
See you next week.